Hi, this is Chris Ramirez with Inside the Mind of a Veteran. Today I want to talk about the new Veterans Mission Act that was signed by the President a couple weeks ago, and just kind of go over what some of the things I noticed that were involved in this. I went in hoping it was going to be positive, and there's some stuff I'm seeing that isn't quite as positive as I would hope. Some actually can be detrimental. It almost looks like a pathway to privatization of the VA, which, in my opinion, is not a good thing. But to give a quick background, Veterans Choice Program started in 2015, I think is when the cards went out. And I have just 10 bullet points about the Veterans Choice Program I printed off the VA's website. To be eligible, you were told you needed to wait. You had to more than a 30-day wait for an appointment. Your residence is more than 40 miles from the closest VA medical facility with a full-time primary care physician. You needed to travel by air, boat, or ferry to the VA medical facility closest to your house. You face an unusual or excessive burden in traveling to the closest VA medical facility based on geographic challenge, environmental factor, medical condition, and other specific clinical decisions. Or you reside in a state or U.S. territory without a full-service VA medical facility that provides hospital care, emergency services, and surgical care, and reside more than 20 miles from such a VA facility. I've actually used the Choice Program. Yeah, it's a good program. It has its hiccups. It has its issues. I was referred to physical therapy through it, and the first time, it was quick, easy. I got referred out. I went to a nearby facility to the VA facility. It was near my house, but their physical therapy was overloaded. So for my initial visits, I got approved for I think 12 visits. But when the therapist requested another extension and named another 12 visits, it took 3 months before there was any motion on it. I actually received the letter approving the care before the therapist did, but they couldn't use that letter. They had to have one straight from Veterans Choice. So it wasn't a perfect program. There were hiccups. I've actually been referred to a couple different providers out in town. One was dermatology, just because there was a backup. So all in all, the program worked for what it intended. It wasn't always the most efficient way to do things, because sometimes I got calls saying I was supposed to go to 2 different facilities, but it worked. And when I first heard about this Mission Act and how it was going to be an extension of the Veterans Choice Program, I was really excited about it, actually, because there are a lot of shortcomings in the VA system because of how it's set up. For example, here in Bakersfield, we actually fall under the LA VA system, which means if you have to go to a hospital, theoretically you're supposed to drive all the way down to the West LA hospital, which is, I believe, 112 miles from here, or Fresno, which is 117. Which is not really feasible. Now, because of that distance, you can actually go to a local ER, but you have to get an advice nurse to recommend it for you so you don't get billed for this. And I've gone through this a couple times, including recently where I was dealing with kidney stones. And it's kind of hard. If it's a life-threatening situation, you can go to an ER and work it out with VA. But I've gone to the ERs before, and I've actually been billed because VA didn't approve it. So that's why you have to call the choice nurse, or the advice nurse. Excuse me. So I was hoping that was one of the things that would be addressed in this new Mission Act. Now, the new Mission Act, it's requiring veterans to coordinate, their VA to coordinate veterans' care, to ensure scheduling of medical appointments in a timely manner, ensure continuity of care and services, coordinate coverage for veterans who utilize care outside of a region from where they reside, and ensure veterans do not experience a lapse in healthcare services. And it uses a lot of the same criteria as the choice program. The distance issues, travel burdens, things like that. One of the first things in that section, so it requires access to community care if VA does not offer the care, or they do not operate a full service medical facility in the state excuse me, that the veteran resides in. That's not really a big change from the choice program. It's actually come word for word. Although the requires access to community care is a new, that's something new, and that's a positive thing. Now, in addition to just the 40-mile rule, you have to meet certain other criteria, and the VA has to not be able to furnish care within the designated access standards established by VA. And some of these are the nature of care services provided, the frequency of care services needed, appointment timeliness. These are really similar wordings, but when you start looking into it even more, one of the things is, VA is authorized to furnish care, but it has to see, especially in cases where deficient timeliness will be determined when compared with same medical service at a different VA facility. So now, instead of just the 30 days, you compare one VA facility to another, which is an issue because, the example I have here, we're part of the West LA VA system. So if you compare that to some place like, Livermore, where they had a VA clinic and they had access to Palo Alto, you're not going to have the same comparisons. Just the volume of people and patients they see is different. Livermore falls under VA, and I actually had to go to Livermore Clinic because that was how VA was managing some of their clinics. And being able to farm out people like that to different clinics actually did provide them a way to get treatment faster. But in a region like this, where it may not be necessary, if you're looking at the Palo Alto region as a whole, and their appointment times for general practice is 2 weeks because they're farming people out to different clinics, and then you look at the Bakersfield area and the West LA where it could be 30 days, it's not a fair comparison. And the reason it's not is you're looking at driving distance, demographics, population size. So issues like that could possibly slow down the care that we need. In addition, deficient quality would be measured when compared with two or more distinct and appropriate quality measures at non-VA medical service lines. The problem, with that, you're comparing two completely different systems. You're comparing VA to civilian practices, and you could be looking at different things like whether a provider involves holistic medicine, or as part of a physical therapy program they incorporate acupuncture, which may not be at VA. So that's those are different services that are available. There's also a note that says the section would require VA to enter into contracts establishing healthcare provider networks It would assign VA-specific requirements and authorizations. So, that has a good side to it, because right immediately after, VA is responsible for scheduling appointments for hospital care. Right now, you have to go through different area companies like TriWest, which they do their best. When they get a hold of you, or when you speak to them, they ask for information on what type of provider you'd like to see, male, female, certain days you have open, what days work better, do you have restrictions, like, in my case, I have a service dog, so I had to make sure it was a provider who was okay with having him in the area. Somebody could be allergic to dogs. So with that, they take that information, they look at all of the providers that are willing to take VA's coverage, and from there they come up with the best appointment they can. Then they call you back and let you know, and they'll leave a message, but usually they prefer to talk to you to see if you're okay with that. And with that part of it, I've had pretty good experiences. I know people right now who are being referred out to clinics out in town for the same issue still, and it's because it's getting a timelier appointment, or more timely appointment, and it better facilitates their need for care. Those initial referrals are great. The problem I've seen is in the extension of referrals, asking for more time on the referral, because maybe you're only being seen once a month instead of once every week, and the extension, an extension on the referral for more visits. And that's where I've seen the biggest hiccup, because it has to go from the provider to whichever insurance group, I guess, for lack of a better term, is going to, it goes from the provider to them, to VA provider who requested it, who has to put in a new referral or just approve more visits. And because of that, it can take, you go from, like in my case, I was getting physical therapy once a week, to I had to wait, 3 months. And by that point in time, it wasn't going to be effective for me, because I was moving out of the area, actually. So if VA is more involved with this and not farming it out, it could be a very beneficial thing, a very beneficial process, because that means VA would be able to schedule appointments directly. It wouldn't have to go through a middleman who would have to find somebody else. And that I could see as a positive thing. There's other parts in this document, and all it is a document I Googled. It's the House Committee on Veterans Affairs VA Mission Act of 2018. And it's just a synopsis of what the act was. And there's information about, scheduling payment rates, or the Medicare rates, which, that is a deterrent for some people to take this insurance, because they're not going to get paid as much as they could taking care of a patient with private insurance. While that's not something a veteran controlled, that is something physicians might take into account. And the fact that they're going to charge one rate and get paid another. So with that in mind, that can limit the amount of providers in an area who are willing to work with the VA and available to the veterans themselves. For certain areas, it also goes off of schedule of whether or not it's considered a rural area, a industrialized area. These all impact the rates. So We're going to talk more about this in a few minutes when we get back from break.
At the time you were arrested, you were served with a DS-367 temporary driver's license. It's good for 30 days, but if you don't act within 10 days, at the end of those 30 days, your license will be suspended. It's important for your lawyer to contact the DMV for you. Set up a driver's license administrative hearing so that your license does not go into suspension. That's something here at Braemar Law we do for you.
I choose Patriot Bail Bonds.
We choose Patriot Bail Bonds.
We choose Patriot Bail Bonds.
If the best criminal attorneys choose Patriot Bail Bonds, who would you choose?
Patriot Bail Bonds. We fight for your freedom.
Patriot Bail Bonds has the best customer service in Bakersfield. Patriot has more 5-star ratings than any bail company in Kern County. Plus, we're fast and affordable. If you run into the law, make Patriot Bail Bonds your first call. That's right, one call, that's all.
If you're in jail, call Patriot Bail.
Your home is perfect. Until it's not. We understand that life has its changes. As your family grows, we're here to help grow with you. Because taking care of your family is important to you and important to us. Your story starts here with Cornerstone Mortgage.
Okay, we're back talking about the Veterans Mission Act that was signed into law. And, you know, as with any kind of program, there's information online you can find about it. It's a government plan, it's government law being signed in effect. And I'm going over a document I found on that. It establishes the rules for VA, establishes the responsibilities. For example, they would require VA to establish quality standards, you know, based on veterans' satisfaction with service and the quality of care, timely care, effective care, safety, including at a minimum complications, readmissions, and death, or efficiency. By taking these into account, VA can work with local hospital or private hospitals, private doctors to try to establish a higher quality of care. One of the biggest problems I found with this is that in Section 105, access to walk-in care, for veterans who are not required to make a copayment at VA would be entitled to 2 visits without a copayment, and then VA would be authorized to charge an adjustable copayment determined by regulations in VA. Now, there's no expansion on this statement. There's no, does this count as just a walk into a doctor to urgent care or to the ER? If you have a chronic condition that you have to go to the ER for sometimes, because it's, you know, it's not, you have flare-ups that aren't managed by, they can't just be managed by the doctor because, you know, like in my case, kidney stones, there's times when the pain exceeds what I can manage at home. And especially on the weekends when the veterans clinics aren't open, one of my only choices is to go to the ER if I'm having severe pain. So does this mean that I could possibly only go to the ER twice in a year, twice in a month? That's the issue I'm having, because then we're talking about, it not only becomes an issue of access of care, but a financial problem or financial problems as well. I can't afford to pay a multi-$1,000 hospital bill, and it doesn't really define the copay amount that VA is authorized to charge. With that, it opens up a lot of issues that that impact the veteran, our veterans. Because of that, it could actually make somebody rethink whether or not they want to go see a doctor, go see urgent care. So in my mind, that actually is setting it up and establishing a principle for the VA to be privatized, because now you have veterans who are paying copays who may not. And for clarification on that, once you get to a certain percentage, which I believe is 70% or higher, you don't have a copay with VA. That's 70% service connection disability. And in my case, I fall into that category, which means I go to the VA, I get referred to, clinics in the VA, and even before this, out in town, and I had no copayment on this. It's to kind of be like being charged a copayment in that situation, kind of like being charged a copayment if you were going for a workers' comp injury. Because in the long run, that's what the VA is. It's workers' comp care for military members. And while it's a different, unique set of circumstances, and just looking at a broad view, that's what it is. So now you have the VA being able to pass on the cost of your treatment to you. In addition, they can kind of do that now with private insurance, because the VA they'll pay the bill and then they'll pass on a percentage to your insurance, which in turn can charge you a copay for going to see a doctor. So it's kind of while it does exist right now as a roundabout type of way, by this law, VA could, after 2 visits, charge you directly. And that can actually take a toll on somebody having to pay out payments like that, especially if it's for something the VA is supposed to be covering as part of the agreement and the purpose of the VA, and instead they're passing that cost back on to the veterans. There's also different information in here about the VA performing market assessments, demand, requests for VA services, which is it's a good thing, because now they're evaluating the program to see what the demand is in certain areas. For example, the Monterey VA clinic I used to go to, they established a physical therapy setup in there. And for the first few days, or first few times I went, there might be one other person in there. And then within 3 months, every veteran in the area who needed physical therapy was referred there, and the clinic got so slammed that they had to start farming people out to civilian practices, to local, physical therapists who could help shoulder that burden that VA was causing on its own. So within that, they also have to provide an assessment of the capacity provided by contracted private providers. For this, that's good, because it does help to establish how much of a load the community can take on. But this information has to go to Congress so Congress can approve it. And also, the Congress requires VA to, under this act, to submit a strategic plan no later than 1 year after the enactment to specify the demand market areas. So that's in turn just to show the usage of the program, how much of an impact it's made, and how much it helps VA take the burdens off of their clinics, their facilities. Oh. Now, right now, like in my situation, instead of going all the way down to LA for some clinics, I'm seeing people by telehealth. It's a good system for certain clinics, in my opinion. It does come up with issues of physical examinations. If a doctor's looking for a certain thing and you're talking to them through a TV screen, they're not going to be able to physically evaluate you. But for routine follow-up appointments or talking to a doctor or a nurse practitioner to get your care established, it is a good system. And actually today I'm going to have another telehealth appointment for a screening, so I'm going to be exposed to it again and see how that goes on. While this is a method for VA to ease the burden on veterans and providers both, because now they don't have to figure out a way to have providers come to Bakersfield or veterans go to LA. These rely on technology, they rely on connectivity. So if you're having an issue with the internet or telephone lines, it can impact what the quality of care is now. If you're having, we've all had hardware updates or software updates that need to go through. These things do impact that system. So it has its uses, it has its benefits, but it has its drawbacks. Now, looking at the Mission Act, one of the things they're trying to do is, provide a way for veterans to go out to, physicians out in town or out in their geographic area instead of taking that load off of VA. Well, and by doing that, then they're also reducing the need for things like telehealth. And you could see a doctor face to face instead of face to screen. Now, within this, it's a 26-page document. It requires the capacity of each VA to be provided, which I'm assuming also takes into consideration things like telehealth, doctors who have limited scheduling. They may only come to the clinic one day a week because they have an outside practice. And then it also takes into consideration the healthcare capacity through community care providers. All of these are supposed to go into this plan where the VA addresses the satisfaction issues of the veterans, the access and quality standards of care, and condition and needs of veterans with service-connected disabilities. And that's one of the other issues about VA healthcare is it's a unique system because of the people it takes care of. And looking at veterans, you have people coming out of the military. Sometimes they've been exposed to, radiation, different chemicals. And right now, in situations like the war that we've been in for, 17 years, you still see people who are, younger than I am, mid-20s. Sometimes now they're having to receive care because they are multiple limb amputee or severe traumatic brain injury, trauma. So these are all special needs, and a lot of the patients, while it is a wide age demographic because of different time frames, all these patients start out for the most part as younger people, mid-20s. They're going in receiving care that you may not traditionally see someone, and in a regular hospital practice, they might not see more than one or two patients who have chronic kidney stones or have spinal injuries, where the VA is seeing people who are exposed to contaminated water supply that's causing issues, or people who have been hit by a roadside bomb. So because of this unique level of care that's required, the VA isn't exactly the same as a regular healthcare plan, because not just the age ranges, but the quantity of people that are impacted. And by farming some of this out to civilian practices is a good thing. But if now I only have 2 visits possibly to go without a copayment, how is that going to impact my care? And there's different sections here for, states veteran homes, standards of quality, access of care. But in reading through this and evaluating it, what I'm seeing is this is a start to the possibility of privatization of VA. And with the privatization of VA, I think we have to worry about things like if you get a job somewhere, you go on their health program, and you have an injury that impacts you from your military service, they can possibly deny you for a pre-existing condition. Well, how is that going to be possible, or how is that going to be handled if, as veterans, we get put into a privatization system where now we have insurance involved who can say, well, you had that condition before we started treating you, or we think you only need 6 visits and then you'll be fine. These standards that different care facilities have don't necessarily line up with what the veterans' needs are. And because of that the unique demands that the veterans have, privatization in my opinion, isn't the way to go. I think that because privatization would lead to be enrolled in a similar market to the rest of the population, you'd start seeing issues like, not having treatment with experimental treatment issues. In places like Palo Alto, where they have Stanford there, they do research and treatment on different ways to treat PTSD, to work with people who have TBIs, to evaluate the possibility of medical marijuana or even Gulf War syndrome and what the specific impact to people is, what causes Gulf War syndrome. And while you can have that out in the civilian healthcare areas, it's really limited to places that are working out of hospitals that are attached to universities. If you go to, one of the big ones like Kaiser or Blue Cross, you're not necessarily going to have access to those same opportunities where you might be involved in trying out a new methodology for treating PTSD or for helping work through a traumatic brain injury. And with the privatization, I see that not being as readily available to veterans. The one thing I've noticed is most VA hospitals are fairly close to a university where they have access to medical students, they have access to that exchange of care where you might have somebody come up with a new methodology to help people with spinal injuries or mobility issues. With this Mission Act, the problem I see is that it looks a lot like a way for the VA to establish the principle to have the veterans pay for their health care. And while there are, depending on your service-connected disability percentage, you have to pay a copay. It's expected. While it's intended to take care of veterans, it is a medical service and it needs money to run. Because of that, there has to be some cost. From what I understand, one of the points on this Veterans Mission Act is it's going to start with a $55 billion cost. That may not be exactly the right number. That's the one I remember seeing. But, while the government and the taxpayers do take on that burden, and, veterans too, now they may have to look at paying for their health care twice, or be impacted by a program that, while it does have good parts to it, doesn't seem like it was implemented or written with the veterans in mind, more the system that takes care of the veterans. And with that difference in ideals, you lead to a program that's more implemented on cost and cost analysis than is taking care of veterans as was intended when the VA was conceived. While I'm hoping that I'm wrong and this Mission Act does turn out to be a positive thing, and I am maybe reading into the information too much, right now I'm not seeing any indication that that's what the end result's going to be. And because of that, I'm very skeptical about this program. I hope that I am wrong, and that this does turn out to be a very good extension and continuation of the choice program, and provides the opportunities for veterans to be seen by providers outside. We'll see. This is Chris Ramirez. We'll see you next time with Inside the Mind of a Veteran.